Present.
Cindy,
Here.
John Polk,
Yes.
and John Haverlick.
Present.
Okay, now it's time for the voluntary Pledge of Allegiance. Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Okay, the next item on our agenda this evening is there's a vacancy on our assembly. We've had one person submit their name. They're interested is Bob Lind. He's offered to serve on the assembly. That'll be till October 2014, the general election. And what we'll do is we'll just have a paper ballot and we'll write yes or no. And Kurt, Kathy will ask you on the phone how you're going to vote so we could tally your vote as well. So.
Okay. Okay, thank you, Mark.
Yep.
Okay.
I don't want to be able to tell them apart.
Mine's the one that's folded in half.
Okay, Kurt, I've got just you and me here. Okay, thank you. Hold on. Hopefully I don't lose you now. Kurt, can you hear us?
Yep, you bet.
Okay. And we'll get the tally from the clerk.
6. Unanimous, 6 yeses.
Okay. 6 votes for Bob Lynn. He'll serve on the assembly till October of 2014, the general election. Bob is out of town currently. He will be sworn in by the clerk when he gets back and attend our next meeting, or the next one he's available. Okay, now we need approval of the minutes. There are no minutes for approval, I guess, of the last meeting. Is there any amendments to tonight's meeting agenda, or if not, I'd entertain a motion for approval.
So move.
Second.
Okay, it's been moved by Member Haverlick, seconded by Member Strand to approve this evening's meeting agenda. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
All right, okay, it passes. And now that brings us to public hearings and bid awards. This evening we have a public hearing, and it's on ordinance 2013-17. This is an ordinance providing for Chapter 14.12, sanitation of the municipal code and providing incentive for recycling. Is there anybody in the audience that would like to speak to this ordinance? Okay, would you come to the microphone and state your name and who you represent, please?
Yes, my name is David Whitethorn, and I've just got a couple questions on this ordinance. I don't know who to address them to, whether to the Borough Assembly here. I've got a question about the salvage permits, and I see they got a tremendous increase on them from $5 a day, which was actually covered 2 days, a Sunday and a Monday, and we went to $10 a day, but there's no annual permit available for sale. I'm just curious if there will be an annual permit for sale, and why we've got such a jump in the fee from $5 for 2 days to $10 a day.
Okay, I guess the one that you could maybe address that to would be the Public Works Director. This part of the meeting is just for the public hearing, and the Assembly can discuss your concerns when we come up to the second reading later on in the meeting. But if,
Okay.
then maybe Carl would be the one that could answer your question, or the manager. Do you have a reason for that?
Sure, I could talk about that a little bit. The salvage program, as most people know, was developed as a way to allow citizens into the landfill to get usable items that have been thrown away by others. And one issue that's come up over the years is that the program has been, by a few, used for a different purpose, which is commercial salvaging for precious metals, for lack of a better word, brass, copper, stainless steel, aluminum, that kind of thing. And those were basically the salvagers that were using the annual permit. And we felt that because we know that there is quite a bit of revenue generated by that activity, and that there has actually been, since the salvage program has started, an increase in the value of the scrap in our pile, that we felt that creating a higher cost of a permit would give the borough some revenue back from that activity, and not be too much of a hardship on those folks that do have the annual permit. So the direction that we're going right now with this ordinance is to turn the salvage program into a daily program at $10 a day, and there will not be an annual permit.
Okay. Did that kind of answer your question?
It kind of does. Is the salvage going to, say, 7 days a week, or would it be just the 2 days a week that there's there?
It will remain a 2-day program.
It'll still stay this 2-day program?
Yes.
Okay. Yeah, I just feel that, you know, the $10 a day is going to put a hardship on several people that go there. I do know that one person that goes there, any money that's found in the facility goes to Salvation Army store. I know that for a fact, and it's delivered down to the red can at Hammer Weekons on Christmas. And so they probably won't receive that funding from this gentleman. And so at $10 a day to go in to find $5, well, he's not going to do that. So, but that's all I got to say.
Okay, thanks, Ole. Any other people in the audience that would like to speak under the public hearing on ordinance 2013-17? Okay, seeing none, the public hearing is closed. That brings us on to item 6 on the agenda. It's visitors' views related to the agenda. Is there any visitors that have views related to this evening's agenda? Okay, seeing none. Is there any visitors' views unrelated? Oh. Okay, Mike.
I think there's, thank you, Assembly members. My name's Mike Bangs, citizen, and part of the Harbor Advisory Board. And I know there's several other people that are here on this issue, and it has to do with the funding for the drive down. And I just want to encourage the Assembly to allow an electrical component to our bid process. We really need to get the numbers from the bid process, and if we don't include that, we're kind of dead in the water. So had the Harbor Board known that the electrical contractors wouldn't bid on this if you left it as an alternative, I'm sure we would have put that into the bid process as part of the base bid. So I just want to encourage you to allow us to include that. We do have the funding for it, as long as it comes in within the guidelines of the estimate. But the money is there. It's not like we're short, but it all depends on what the actual bid comes in, and unless we do include an electrical component to that, we won't know what the numbers are. So anyway, that's all I have. Any questions?
You're talking about putting the electric component of it in the base bid then, instead of an
Right, a
alternative.
portion of the electrical component, it'd be great if we came in under bid and were able to have more money to do a lot more electrical stuff, possibly better parking lot lighting or whatever, but we need to have a component in there in order to make the bid legitimate as far as the borough code. So that's what we were hoping to go ahead, and we had listed all the lighting as, or electrical and lighting as alternatives because we weren't sure how the process was going to follow through with the, but then when we found out that the electrical contractors weren't going to bid on it unless it was an actual part of the base bid, then it won't work, so.
Interesting, but I think the Assembly will have more discussion on this when we talk about it to approve or not the change of the bid. Mr. Hoag?
I have a couple of questions for the, if it's okay. What component there's a couple of different electrical things in here. What component are you talking about?
Well,
You said a component, so.
What we talked about was including the general lighting that would be on our piling out at the end for safety purposes, and I think lighting on the approach glow could answer the details of that a lot better. But it was it's in that paperwork there. It's kind of confusing to me exactly how the alternatives work. It's the way I think Steve did this.
It's a,
Assembly when we get to that part on the agenda, so we're under visitors' views
Right.
related to the agenda, so I appreciate
One thing
your...
that I would like to say in addition is that this drive-down facility is something that's been long overdue for this community. It's something that will help not only the fishing business, but the tourism, a myriad of good things will come from this facility, and I think it's important that we try as best we can to make it happen.
I wholly agree with that.
Okay, thanks.
Mr. Lynch, you have a comment under views related to the agenda.
Mr. Mayor, members of the Assembly, and Brian Lynch, I'm the Executive Director of Petersburg Vessel Owners Association. I just want to echo what Mike just said here. I think that we really need to put that lighting, particularly on the pilings and down on the drive-down portion itself, definitely needs to be in there. I would really hate to see this project fall by the wayside, as Mike said. This is something that should have been in the works 20, 30 years ago. I mean, I remember going down to Thorn Bay about 20 years ago and seeing the drive-down facility they had there, and I was just shocked that Petersburg, one of the major seafood-producing communities in the nation, didn't have a drive-down dock. And I think the money is there. I agree with Mike, and what I know about this, there is money there, and I'd really urge you to move ahead and put that lighting portion, include that in the bid process. Thank you.
While you're here, do you want to talk about your letter, Brian, while you were up at the podium?
Do that too, unless somebody else wants to discuss this.
Mr. Mayor, members of the Assembly, I believe Kathy has distributed a letter that is being addressed to our congressional delegation relating to activities of the rather large mines that are being planned on the transboundary rivers in Canada. What this letter is basically seeking federal involvement, particularly the State Department, more involvement with the actual permitting process in Canada on these mines. Right now, there's some input. The state is having there's some committees that have been set up, work groups, to discuss some of these issues, but we believe that this really requires a lot more input from the federal government, like I said, particularly the State Department. And when I say we, this letter was basically drafted by PVOA, Rivers Without Borders, Petersburg Indian Association, and a number of directors and people involved with other commercial fishing groups and environmental and conservation groups were involved with editing this letter. What we're trying to do is get a sign-on, and right now we have approximately 60 target agents, organizations, commercial sport fisheries organizations, tribal organizations, communities, processors that we're going to send this out to see if they want to sign on to this thing. And I'm not asking for you to do anything tonight with this, but I'd appreciate if you'd read this over, see if this is something that the borough would want to sign on to along with this, and hopefully we can maybe take it up at the next meeting, which I believe is what, next week? Or the second, whatever it is. Yeah. Anyway, I just wanted to give you a heads up on this and try to get the input on this, and so you could read this thing over. It is a long one, but basically the meat of the whole thing is basically on the closing remarks. And anyway, PVOA is one of the lead groups on this. So if you have any further questions, please contact me on this.
Be available for the next meeting, Brian, if there's any more questions after we read the letter?
I didn't think I was going to be here, but I am. But I will be in town. So.
All right. Thank you.
Thank you.
Got a little ahead of myself thing. I think that's a view unrelated to the agenda, but is there any other people in the audience with views related to the agenda this evening? Joe, would you state your name?
Good evening. I'm Joe Willis. I currently have 2 vessels in the harbor. I just wanted to reiterate what the other gentlemen are talking about here with our drive-down facility. It seems like this has been a carrot in front of our nose for years now. I cannot tell you how valuable this would be to our business, and I'd hate to see us lose this opportunity because of seems like just a typo or something on how to get stuff addressed here. But if we could make this happen, I cannot tell you how appreciative my back would be, and all the people that have to trip over my crab pots at low water trying to get to their boats while we're using the ramp. That's me. I'm sorry. But just want to get it on record that a lot of people are almost as scared as me and not ready to get up here, but please make this drive-down ramp happen. Thank you so much for your hard work.
Anybody else in the audience with views related to this evening's agenda? See more people trickling in, but I guess not. So now I'll get back in order. Is there anybody else with views unrelated to the agenda this evening? Okay, that brings us to board, commission, and committee reports. I don't see that there is any on the list, so we'll move on to the consent agenda. There's no items under that. Report of other officers. There's nothing there. And that brings us to the mayor's report. First item on the mayor's report is there's an appointment to a vacancy on the library board. Resident Chelsea Tremblay has submitted a letter of interest to fill the vacancy, and this will be until the October 2014 election. So without any objection, I would like to appoint Chelsea to the library board. Okay, I don't see any objection, so thank you, Chelsea, for putting your name in. And the next item under the mayor's report is a reappointment to the Thomas Bay Power Authority. And I'd like to reappoint John Jensen to the Thomas Bay Power Authority again. He's been on there since 2007. He understands the issues. I know we've agreed not to fund our half of the billing for that, but it is still an ordinance and it's still active. So without any objection, I'd like to appoint John back to the Thomas Bay Power Authority. And now we have report on attendance at the Alaska Municipal League conference. The mayor, myself, and Mr. Hogue went, and Cindy went to the Alaska Municipal League, and Mr. Haverlick went. So anybody have any comments on their visit to Anchorage? I'll go last. I've got some comments. Mr. Haverlick.
Mr. Mayor, 2 things I want to talk about. One related to Brian's letter, and I really appreciate him doing this because this is a real concern to everybody from people who live off subsistence to the fishing industry, that these relaxation or doing away with these mining restrictions or the possibility of what they could be dumping into our rivers would be devastating. And the one thing I was picking up at that conference, it sounds like the Parnell administration is going more along with the Canada than we would like, and with his pushing of mines, and hopefully not. But that was the one thing that was being talked about. The other that sounded kind of exciting as far as jobs coming to Alaska was the possibility of the gas line coming. They're talking about possibility of the small gas line running down from Prudhoe to Fairbanks and Anchorage, starting that in 2016 and maybe finishing it by 2018, which would call for several thousand workers for 2 years. And hopefully people, I know that's been back and forth almost as bad as the drive down, Doc, but the hopefully people will get ready for that, and that'll open a lot of jobs for Alaskans, especially for welders, construction people, and really look forward to doing that and be a great relief to at least Anchorage and Fairbanks. I was hoping they'd push the big line, because it seems like they have buyers for our gas, and that would really help us economically. But right now they're looking at just a small line. But those are the two big things that I got out of the conference.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Havlicek. John, you want to comment on?
Well, Mr. Mayor, I attended the economic development portion of the conference, and it reminded me that the efforts that happens here through the EDC, I guess, is something that we don't hear enough of, hear about as to what we are doing. The speakers there emphasize that instead of looking for the next big thing, work on a whole bunch of small things, and even that will take years of fruition. And I think that should, I'd like to see that as a regular report back on the agenda, so we know what the community is doing with that money to spur economic development. And the other pitch that was made, which I've heard our manager say before, is instead of trying to lure some mythical outside industry to come in here, to work on the businesses that are here to see if there's something we can do that's appropriate that will help them grow and add employees. So that part of it was interesting. As somebody who had not attended AML before, I thought it important to attend the nuts and bolts sessions for newly elected members, and I got to tell you that sadly those sessions were not very useful. There's a significant difference between the issues faced by what they call second-class cities in Alaska and places with us where we have staff to do all the work. And listening to some of those comments scared me. I mean, those poor folks have no city management basically, and they're responsible for grants and some funding with virtually no training. And it's not an enviable position for some of them. So it certainly made me appreciate the fact that we don't have to worry about some of the nuts and bolts, because we've got competent staff to do so.
Okay, thank you. Cindy, did you want to comment?
And actually my experience, but you went to the workshop session, I went to the 2-day newly elected officers training, and I have to say that I thought it was a very good session. There was a very robust discussion both about conflict of interest, which is a big deal in small communities, especially communities that are smaller than ours, where everybody is related to everybody and involved in each other's business. And also a lot of discussion about the Open Meetings Act, and just some basics on Robert's Rules and lobbying the legislature and some other tools for newly elected officers. But the presenters for the session that I went to were different than the ones that John went to, but I would recommend it. And then the other thing that I wanted to say about having attended, I went to a variety of sessions. Some of them were kind of weak in their presentation, but it was interesting to see the range of issues that they covered. There was a session on changes in the Arctic and how that will have legal and regulatory and business impacts throughout the state. There was a discussion on tribal and municipal relations that didn't really go as far as I was hoping. There was an interesting discussion about USDA rural loan and grant programs. Steve says he's familiar with a lot of those. There was one in particular that might apply to Petersburg, and that is that there are grants available for hoop houses and food production. And there was a lot of discussion about food security and new food project things. So if folks have an interest in that, it might be worth contacting USDA and pursuing some of that. And then just to let people know some of the resolutions that were before the Municipal League, things that they are championing that I found interesting were the promotion of a statewide long-term energy plan. There was emphasis on repair, replacement, and maintenance of all modes of transportation infrastructure, and better prioritization of DOT projects. I know that's something that's near and dear to us as well. Unfunded liability of state retirement systems. They were in support of roadside vegetation treatment without hazardous chemicals, which we have also discussed. Continuance of revenue sharing to Alaska communities, and assessment of statewide workforce development needs for fisheries and related sectors. So those are some things that they were putting forward that were also of interest to Petersburg.
Okay, great. And I know it sounds like the Alaska Municipal League didn't move forward the resolution that they had on the herbicides and spraying. There was some language in it they wanted to change, I guess, according to what Mr. Haverlick conveyed to me. So hopefully they'll get that squared away and get that done. I attended the Conference of Mayors on Monday or Tuesday when I got up there, and there was 52 mayors in attendance, and it was pretty interesting. There was discussion over all different realms of things. One of them was PERS liability, and there's talk of a possibility of towns that are shrinking in size. You have to lay off a staff or two because you can't afford it in your budget. They're looking at a way to do away with the penalties that have been assessed on some of the communities. They're quite steep, so it'll be based on a percentage of your annual budget, so hopefully that comes through. During the discussion, part of it was economic development, and I was sitting at a table with a bunch of other Southeast mayors. I think there was 4 besides myself, and I brought up made the statement, not being that good of a public speaker when I'm in a room full of people. I said, what are we going to do about anti-economic development by letting the sea otters keep invading our grounds and affecting our fisheries? And actually spurred a pretty good discussion. At the end result, there was a motion made to, I don't know if it'll do anything, there's been a lot of them made from different agencies all over the state, municipalities and private people as well, but the Conference of Mayors supported this motion to encourage National Marine Fisheries Service and NOAA to try to do something about the management of otters. And I know it's a tough battle, but at least there's one more contingency that'll be on board with it. So it was unanimous with 52 people supporting that. I guess that's it for my visit to the Anchorage Alaska Municipal League. The next assembly meeting will be on December 2nd at noon. And also on the 5th, there's a joint meeting between the hospital board and the assembly. I believe it's at 9 a.m. and it'll be in the assembly chambers. So that's it for the mayor's report and report of other elected officials from the Alaska Municipal League Conference. That brings us to the manager's report. So Steve, it's all yours.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Petersburg Power and Light continues to work with contractors and GLO's staff on the electrical system for the North Harbor. Kind of a thanks to a lot of folks here. Public Works for getting the tree located, the Baptist Church for donating it, and for Scott Newman, his crew, Chamber of Commerce, and Matt Briner, who will be working on getting lights on it starting tomorrow, so for the community Christmas tree. Peak usage on the SEPA system has been significant, probably a lot less this week than it was last week, but with the cold weather, Wrangell now had a system peak that was equal to ours. So it's something that Joe and his group, as well as all the SEPA folks, are watching pretty close. We had, and this rain may help a lot, but the reservoirs did not refill after last season's record dry October. Ketchikan will be burning diesel probably a big part of the winter, so we'll have to be watching it. I've asked Joe Nelson to put together some kind of usage reports as well as reservoir reports that will be forwarded. He'll be sending directly to the assembly and department heads, so we'll keep a close eye on it. Chief Soyhart attended the CCAD meeting in Juneau on the 21st, and he'll be going to the Executive Development Conference December 3rd through the 6th in Anchorage. Seminar will include various trainings as well as the meetings for Alaska Police Standards Council, Alaska Association of Chiefs of Police, and the AML JIA Public Safety Advisory Board. Congratulations to Jenna Durst. She's been hired to replace Brian Kilkenny in the dispatch area. And Jim Kerr, who was selected as the new sergeant for our police department. Effective date of his promotion will be January 1st, 2014. We had 4 applicants for the sergeant's position. They all did really well. Thanks to a group of people that helped with that interview process, including Angel Warhatch, John Hamilton, Susan Omer, and Sergeant Joel Smith, who from the Wasilla Police Department came down to help us with the interviews, and also while here did some force mindset training for our police officers. And thanks to some, I don't know if knee breaking or how he did it, but it didn't cost us anything. So thanks to Chief Swihart for that. Breakfast with Santa planning is ramping up. Make sure to keep December 14th free for those folks who want to go see Santa. Youth Basketball All-Stars will be going over to Wrangell in a few weeks, and they will also be visiting us as well. November 30th through the 1st here in Petersburg, and December 6th through 8th in Wrangell. Parks are all closed down for the winter, including all the bathrooms. And on the Rasmus Engie Bridge, we are still watching it for plank replacement as we start to get the lumber we need to do the more in-depth rehab. Chris Cotta has been in contact with Mr. Litzheim from the mill, and we're basically looking at every log that comes at the logs, and then looking at the lumber itself after it's milled. That's all for the bridge decking. The logs allocated to our project were logged in 2009 and appear to be in sound condition, although we have to double check all of that as they come in. Carl is working with local ADOT Maintenance and Operations Manager Mike Etcher on the crosswalk issue at Hagen. We're still waiting for word on whether we can get a crosswalk at 2nd Street prior to the 2015 Hagen Drive project. We'd really like to do that. It's not the safest intersection for folks with the library now there. Water plant contractor ASRC McGraw submitted their record drawings for the Phase 3 of the water plant project. Unfortunately, they were rejected and returned for some extra work. Carl's team is working on that. That is a requirement with DEC that those be on record and contain certain things. So we're making sure that happens. Pump Station 5 project is still working really well. We do have an issue with the manhole on the site that must be fixed, and the contractor is working on addressing the problem. The SCADA system is also incomplete, but again, the contractor is working to finish this up as well. Chris and Carl are evaluating whether the borough, with assistance by the consulting engineers, can accomplish the bulk of the Pump Station 1 force main project without involvement by DOT. Some advantages to that, including some cost savings, potentially. We'll be talking to Dow HKM, who's doing the engineering work on that, to basically fine-tune, and they'll be bringing a recommendation to the Assembly to talk about. Carl's also working with AML on the prospect of accepting dredge material from their dock area. If this material is useful, it may be placed up at the landfill to help with our construction of what we went through this spring and summer and fall. If it's sloppy stuff, we would put it in our mud dump. But again, we're not there yet. We've got some more contractual issues to deal with the contractor and AML. Subcontractor for ASRC McGraw was in the library last weekend to replace the glass storefront that leads into the children's room. We're still waiting for gutters and refinishing of the floor in the large meeting room. We have continued to hold the final payment pending the completion of those items and have informed McGraw of that. Terra secured a 2014 telecommunications subsidy for a percentage of the library's telecom costs, that's internet and telephone. program called the E-rate system. She's already working on the 15 application, but it's a way to offset costs for both internet and telephone costs for libraries. So keeps those maintenance costs down. She's also looking at a new shared in-state consortium for the library. While there's some upfront costs, what it does is it allows to cut our annual costs to the group that we already currently work. Plus it adds increase in collection, so we can access books all throughout the state of Alaska and get them sent here. Again, lots of work to do before we're there, but has some possibilities to, we'll pay some money up front, but then lower our annual maintenance costs. Plans are in place to install 2 handicap showers into the apartments and elderly housing in January and to replace 10 more windows this spring. This goes along with some new carpet that was installed last week as part of the excess money from the roof and facility grant received by the borough. So it's basically we are able to reallocate some money from the roof project that was not used to do the carpeting and some windows and some extra grant money we received. Building maintenance is trying to coordinate with school, Parks and Rec, and the library on various projects, including security cameras at the library and the community gym, and an upgrade of the alarm system at the school and community gym aquatic center area. And just last and equally important, congratulations to Doug Weldy, who was elected as the fire chief by the volunteers. So that's it, unless there's questions.
Okay, any questions of the manager? No.
Steve, I had 2 questions. One, what type of lumber is Pete providing for the replacement boards for the bridge?
Carl, can you answer that for me? I don't.
Cedar, fir?
What's that?
A cedar or fir? Or
It's hemlock.
Hemlock? Okay. And then the other question I had is the vandalism at the library pretty much halted or subsided? Or?
I will defer to the chief on this. I have not heard of any other reports, though, of any vandalism.
Okay.
So unless...
No recent reports that I'm aware of.
Okay.
Okay, thank you.
Any other questions of the manager on his report? Mr. Hogue?
Mr. Mayor, I had forgotten, and the manager's report reminded me, part of what I learned at AML is that our chief is on the AML advisory board on police policy issues, and I think that's a plus for us, and congratulations. And probably sometimes it's a hair puller, but I'm sure we'll benefit from it.
Okay, any other questions of the manager? Okay, seeing none, I'll pop back to the mayor's report. I had a note here. Actually, I should have found it. It's about a page long, but should have caught my eye. Anyway, while I was in Anchorage, I had participated in a teleconference with the Cape Petersburg Intertie Steering Committee, and all the people involved in that committee were there by phone. Funding activities, IPEC said since they had to extend the line to go into Cake, the price went up, so the state was kind of balking a little bit at the funding, or doing the amount that it went up, so they suggested that it might be worth looking at again. They're definitely keeping an eye on it. Cake wants to pursue it as their #1 project for their town. But they think the estimate from Commonwealth Engineers, Mark Shinman, said the line would cost $500,000 less per mile if there was a road along it to build. So that was one of the pieces of information. And Mark Shinman from Commonwealth brought up that the D-Hiddle study update is in hand, and they'll go over it and circulate it to the communities. As soon as I get that as the Petersburg representative to the steering committee, I will give it to the clerk, and she can circulate it to the rest of the assembly. The draft EIS has been sent to the Forest Service. Comments, it should be back to Commonwealth by next week, and it will be published by February 7th of 2014. There will be public meetings to go over the EIS, one in Cake and one in Petersburg in late February. So I'm glad I remembered that, and so that's where that is. So now that we're done with the managers and mayor's report, it brings us to unfinished business, and there's no ordinances for third and final reading. The one ordinance, I believe, for the second reading, and that's ordinance 2013-17. An ordinance providing for Chapter 14.12 entitled Sanitation of the Municipal Code, updating current language to reflect borough incorporation and providing incentive for recycling. The purpose of this ordinance is to update code language to reflect borough incorporation and to provide for a commingled recycling service. The ordinance has been reviewed by legal counsel. I'd entertain a motion to adopt ordinance 2013-17 in its second reading.
So move.
Second.
Been moved by Member Havlicek, seconded by Member Strand to adopt ordinance 2013-17. Any discussion?
Mr. Mayor,
Yes, John.
I wonder if we could have some more detail from Carl on the salvage issue. Is that something that if it was not privately salvaged, that the borough would have a revenue stream from, or is the quantities of the material such that it's simply better to encourage private persons to come up and salvage those metals?
Mr. Mayor and Assemblymember Hoag, the value of that pile is definitely there. We saw almost $70 a ton received from a scrap metal vendor who recently unloaded the pile before the harbor dredging started. So there is value there. I believe that the commercial salvagers that I mentioned before, they focus in on the higher priced metals, whereas when we unload a whole pile like that, is everything goes. So I guess it's a hard question to answer, that there is value there, and that has changed from when I started as director. We were basically giving that pile away just to get it off island. And the competitive nature of scrap prices rising created an atmosphere of competitiveness among scrap vendors in the region, and so we have this value that's there. It's hard managing the utility to see that value leave the landfill without some a good return on it, and the proposed changes to the salvage program really don't touch that that concern, but it does help. The bulk of the pile does remain up there, and when we do unload it, we get value for it. So it's a step in the right direction, but it may not be fully recovering the value that the borough does not achieve by having it open to commercial salvaging.
Yes.
Carl, what was the check we got on the metals? Was it 76,000?
Roughly, yeah, around there. For 1,000.
The borough received when the metal pile was taken by the.
That was quite a volume. That was all the vehicles, carcasses left up there in the fill. And
that's not something that's going to happen every year, correct?
No, it's about 1,000 tons, and it was a 3-year stretch in amassing that 1,000 tons.
Any other discussion on this ordinance? There will be one more reading. Any other assembly members? Yeah, I kind of have questioned this all along, the raising it to $10 a day, and instead of trying, and then no annual limit. I was kind of thinking that it might be good to, if it's $5 for 2 days, maybe it could go to $10 for 2 days, and then if it's $100 for the annual permit, what is in this ordinance, maybe it could be doubled to 200 or 300, or make it so the people that are doing this, it's still more affordable to them. But seeing so I can't make a motion, just throwing that out for a suggestion. Whether it goes anywhere or not, I don't know.
Mr. Mayor, could we ask Public Works Director's reaction to that, what his thoughts are?
Sure.
Or are they reflected in the ordinance?
I'm trying to find the wording in the ordinance, and I can't find the exact section that it talks about but I know the gist of it being going from 5 for 2 days, Sunday and Monday of each week, to $10 for every day. And there was a $100 annual fee before, but this ordinance doesn't have it in it. Carl?
So what is the question exactly? I'm sorry.
I can't make a motion, but I suggested to my partners up here that I was thinking it might be good, instead of jumping it from $5 for 2 days to $10 daily and not having any annual fee in there for the people that go up there and actually make a aggressive endeavor to, salvage out of there and give them another chance at an annual fee. And John was wondering, Mr. Hoag was wondering what your reaction was to my idea.
Mr. Mayor, may I be the bad guy here for a minute and then let Carl add on? I'll say this carefully. I've never heard Mr. Whitethorn's name taken in vain. So I can say this carefully. Our staff, as well as Carl, deal with some of the other people that have salvaged up there on a regular basis. I think Carl used the words competitive sport. That it has become a side business for people in some ways, and that up to the point of grabbing stuff off the baler belt, doing things they're not supposed to in the rush to get something they think of value up there. It's not the daily use folks that we have the issue with. It's unfortunately people who have bought these annual permits and are up there very frequently, and it's taking some staff time to try to keep an eye on them to keep them from, we've had fairly loud disagreements between them, fights among them, but I saw that first. Did I miss anything, Carl?
You covered a lot of it. My goal, I was trying to find a good way to take the pressure off the commercial side of things. This helps. It doesn't eliminate it. I've been really brainstorming and trying to come up with different ideas to eliminate the commercial salvaging without really eliminating it. It's a very difficult question, and this is a step in the right direction. The annual permit issue, going away from that requires every person that wants to salvage to stop in the scale house, fill out a permit, pay their money. It slows the whole process down. On Sunday morning, my staff tells me that at certain times of the year, there's a lineup that starts early in the morning. The facility isn't open till 9, but there are people there sometimes at 5, 6 in the morning, I hear. And so that is the competitive nature that has arisen out of a program that was really intended to be to go get a part off a car or to get a piece off an appliance so they can keep something going, at their house. It really came about not as a money-making venture for residents of Petersburg. It was a salvage program. It was to reuse useful things that other people had thrown away. And so trying to refocus the program on that type of activity has been difficult.
Okay, thank you. Any more discussion on ordinance 2013-17?
Mr. Mayor, Kurt Willinger here.
Okay, Kurt, what's up?
Hey, can I ask Carl a question? How many of these annual permits does he give out a year?
It's a handful. I would say 7 or 8.
Okay, so it's not a real significant number. I mean, for numbers, it's significant for those people that are actually trying to participate in it. But, okay, thanks.
Okay, thanks, Kurt. Any more discussion on this ordinance? Will the clerk call the roll?
Kurt,
Yes.
Mark,
Yes.
Nancy,
Yes.
John Heverly,
Yes.
Cindy,
Yes.
and John Hoag.
Yes.
Okay, ordinance 2013-17 passes 6-0. That brings us on under unfinished business. Item B, the Juneau appeal of the Petersburg Borough boundaries. Still, there's nothing, no new news from the Superior Court, so anxiously awaiting that. It seems like the redistricting issue might be solved. The court has ruled that the redistricting board's proclamation plan meets the state constitution's requirements. The Riley plaintiffs have said they will not appeal the decision. Petersburg has gone on record in the past in support of the 2013 proclamation plan. A map of the southeast voting districts that will go into effect in 2014 is attached to this meeting packet. There might be some on the table if people are interested, but what it does is it takes Petersburg out of the Juneau Senate district, in-house districts. It puts us in with Sitka and the northern end of Prince of Wales down to about Craig, and we're in the same Senate district as Wrangell and Ketchikan, but they're in a different House district. So it looks a better situation for the borough. And now this brings us to consideration to amend the drive-down facility construction bid documents and funding plan. At the September 27th, 2013 Assembly meeting, the Assembly accepted the Harbors and Port Advisory Board's recommendation and authorized the engineers to prepare a final construction document and proceed to bid. The approved construction plans consisted of a base project with 7 alternatives. At a recent pre-bid conference, it was noted by interested contractors that omitting any electrical components from the base project discouraged electrical subcontractors to participate in the bid process. Since the pre-bid conference, P&D is proposing the project be amended to include some electrical work in the base project and provide 5 added alternatives instead of the original 7. So, to get it on the table, I need a motion to adopt.
Mr. Mayor, I would move to add to the RFP lighting for the cost of lighting for the lower part of the drive-down dock, if nothing else, just for safety purposes and usability.
Is there a second?
Second.
Okay, it's been moved by member Haverlick, seconded by member Strand to go with the change in the bid documents for the drive-down dock. To Steve, would you like to explain your sheet?
I can do that if everyone would like.
I was a little confused with the numbers.
Okay.
I mean, just for the record.
For the audience record, there should be a pile of these sitting over there.
For the record, I could say I've been involved in the funding for, or not involved in the funding, but helping to get all the funding for this project, and I would really like to see it go forward. So we'll see what we have to do here to. And I've got a question for Steve or Glo. I mean, if we don't change this, it still goes to bid and we get the base project. Am I wrong in assuming that?
You're not wrong. There's a risk that we'll have fewer bidders, therefore it may affect the price.
Okay, so okay, the base bid, the project, the dock will still, okay.
Let me back up. You've heard several people in the room talked about it. What happened was the project was approved, which is, looking at my little sheet, the left-hand side of the column there. Back in September, went out to bid in a pre-bid conference. When the contractors showed up to ask questions, the lack of electric in the base bid caused them some consideration. Several of the contractors talked about not bidding on the project because it's a lot of work to get to the point of actually putting a bid in, and if it's an alternate, not the base bid, there's really no guarantee that they even have a chance at the work being done. So P&D came to Glo, and I believe the Harbor Board, and said, we think it may be in your best interest to change this around and do an addendum to add these back in. What I'd like to do is I'll go through my sheet because I tried to explain it. Original construction estimate, upper left-hand corner, 8.9 million. Added that to that contingency of 1.9 million, giving us a project total of about 10.85 million. The alternatives under that scenario, this is what was approved back in September, was another $1 million, giving us a total for the whole project with the alternatives of just shy of 12 million, 11,923,988. There were 7 alternatives that add up to that $1 million. Alternate 1 was a float corner pile. Alternate 2, lighting and conduit. 3, electrical equipment and pedestals. 4, seasonal water service. 5, lighting for the uplands. 6, anodes and some other things with that. And alternate 7, increase the dock width. Tonight, what we're asking the Assembly to approve is a revised construction estimate that goes as follows. The The original, again, was 8.9 million. The new revised construction estimate would be 9.287 million. Contingency would be 2 million. Project total would go to 11,362,308. That is a difference of $511,096. The alternates would drop from $1 million to $687,176. So if you look at the total of the project with alternates, it goes to 12 million, up from 11.9, or a difference of 125,000. Going through the alternates, the original alternate 1, the float corner pile, is moved into the base bid. Alternate 2, the lighting and conduit, this would be the approach and getting the conduit in the everything so that down the road, if you wanted to add more electrical, the conduit would be there. That was moved into the base bid. Those are the two items that were moved into the base bid to make the difference. The old alternate 3 becomes alternate 1 now. Alternate 4 becomes alternate 2. Alternate 5 becomes 3. Alternate 6 becomes 4, and alternate 7 becomes alternate 5. The funding plan that we're recommending at this point, again, the project deficit at this point would be $511,000. The harbor fund balance is currently $164,537. We have raw fish tax in excess of what we were using for operations from this past year of $260,000, and then we will receive a very large raw fish tax payment from this past summer. Well, this is a pure estimate, and I've included notes there to talk about that. About $381,000 that could be put aside for a capital project. That's well over. That comes to about $805,000. That's well over the $511 needed to fund it. I calculated the 381 from 13. Again, these are just estimates. We received $410,000 in raw fish tax from the past year. This year was monster. But I'm only saying, assuming we'll only get $600,000 in raw fish tax. It will probably be higher than that. But again, trying to be sure that there's money here for this project. If you use the same ratio of operating expenses to capital, that's where that 381 comes up from. And again, I think that number's low. What I didn't include in here, just because I don't like doing it, we're way ahead of, in good shape on the North Harbor. We're not using up our contingency. We've got quite a bit of money left in that North Harbor project, and in all likelihood, we'll end the North Harbor project with money still in our hands, and that also could be used towards us. Again, I did not put that in here because the project's not done, and that always worries me a little bit. But
If there was money left over from the North Harbor project, it would have to be reappropriated through the legislature, since it's a different grant, or have you looked into that?
Our money, it's our money.
our money, yeah. Our
For
match.
anything we want to do in the harbor? That's a guarantee?
Yep,
Okay,
It's not grant money.
it's not grant money.
okay.
So,
Well, that's good news, better
So,
news.
but again, for the purpose of tonight, I did not even include any of the North Harbor funds in this. Again, it's just the project's not done, and you never know what could happen. But just with the raw fish tax piece, the funding is there, actually more so.
Mr. Hogue?
Mr. Manager, does the moving these two alternatives into the bid documents bring the lighting issue to satisfy the speakers? I mean, will this be an adequate lighting for the project?
I can't answer for the speakers. So, but Glow, this is what the engineer has put together. So I can't go beyond that.
Mr. Mayor and Assembly, what it really does, it kills a couple birds with, this stone of, it gets the electrical and contractors enough portion of the incentive to bid on this, and therefore will qualify the bids coming in. We need numbers in all those alternates. We need numbers in there in order to deem them as responsive bids. So it does that for us. It also, yes, lays groundwork that we need. If we build this place and it doesn't have any electrical in it, it's going to be a black hole down there. And I'm, scared to death of going through a dark winter without any lights on the facility. So I think it does all of that, and it's definitely needed and a major portion of the facility.
Okay, could we get an explanation for the float corner pile, please?
The float corner piles, what they will do is they'll serve as large fenders off of those corners. If you've gone to tie up at the fuel dock, you've noticed the large fender pile that we put in here this last year, just to kind of take the brunt of the force of boats tying up to the face of that dock. This will do the same thing. These will be on the corners to protect that facility. They'll have a rolling fender system on them, so when a boat hits or a bigger boat glances off of that, it will continue to push the energy out from the float. We're having issues on sea float where boats will come, into that 4 knot current out there and hit hard and tend to peel off the corner of the sea float. So that is one of those things that we're looking as a little bit of a preventive maintenance item.
Okay.
Any other questions from assembly members of the Harbor Board? Glow, I have a question for you. It says float corner pile, so that'd be one north and south?
Yeah.
And those won't interfere? I remember the last meeting I was at when the engineer was there, the pilings that hold the dock in place are on the ends, so the collars can be removed and the float can be pulled out
Right.
beached for maintenance.
They're
These
outside
won't
and over.
they won't be in the way? Okay.
No, they're
I hope.
outside and over.
And then, so the lighting and the conduit that we're looking at moving into the base bid, that will get the conduit from the street all the way down to the float and have some lights on it?
Correct. It
But
will,
no upland lighting currently?
No.
Okay. Or-
It'll lay the trench through the fill and bring the lighting to the dock and the transfer bridge. So we'll have lighting on those two items. Also, those pilings are set up or equipped with with lights on the tops of them as well. So that was a safety factor that we considered when adding those fender piles back into the base bid.
Okay, so I guess moving these two into the base bid, and if we'd have lights all the way down the pier, down the ramp, and something on the float.
Well, they're just red safety lights on the end of those two pilings.
Okay.
Yeah. And the only other thing I'd like to add to that funding portion is that the base bid itself will have $464,000 of contingency. So perhaps, you need to factor that in. This is a kind of a shot in the dark. It's our best, scenario of what this bid could come in at, but it is just an estimate, and we won't really know the hard numbers until we open up those bids. And we might be back before you, saying we can't afford, or maybe we can afford the whole entire project, who knows?
So in this consideration to amend the construction bid and the documents, I don't really see where it states that the Harbor Board's reserves would pay for that. Is that the intent? If the bid goes out and we've got 10.8 million, if my numbers are right, in the bank, if
Yeah.
it costs us 11,362,000, that $511,000 of difference from what we have on hand and what it's going to cost, where's the money going to be guaranteed to come from?
Well, if Power and Light wants to pay for the lights, they could.
We've
But,
gone down that road.
I mean, that's
Yeah.
that's the funding mechanism is our savings, and that's,
Okay.
we've calculated that we should have, by the time May comes around, we should be sitting pretty well.
Right. I just, in my mind, if I'm going to vote for this, I'd like, which I, support going as far as we can on this project, I'd like to know that we have the money sitting there, and the finance director's good with it, and the manager's good with it, and
Jody can speak to, I'm fine with this. So I'm clear, the Harbor Board hasn't seen this. other than
Okay.
tonight. I mean, I finished this afternoon based on the documents that Glow had provided to me, put it together to try to make it, attempted to make it easier for the assembly to look at, and came up with the funding plan based on some conversations with Jody. But I mean, Jody can speak for herself.
I'm fine with it. I say bid it and hope for the, hopefully we'll be able to cover all the alternates. And I don't think anyone said tonight that so far the only money that's been put in this project is $10.8 million from the state. The harbor hasn't
Right.
put in any money for it. And they probably will be doing so.
As long as you're comfortable with it, and the manager is, and I just wanted to bring that up for my concerns.
Would I be able to come up and speak real quick?
Sure.
I'm Bob Martin, Harbor Board member. I think, one, it may be obvious already to you, but the reason we pulled all this electrical out in the first place is because we're so eager to make this project happen. We wanted to get the base bid down to just an absolute minimum, because there's some money expiring, you know, over $3 million, I think, here in July.
14.
So, yeah, so we sort of cut too deeply. What we didn't realize is we made it an unattractive package for someone to bid on, because even though we pulled it out in the alternates, they still have to bid on all those alternates, or else it's a non-responsive bid. So we cut a little too deeply, and now we just want to add back in the minimum to make it happen. So I appreciate your support on that.
Thanks, Bob. Any other discussion on this consideration to amend the drive-down construction bid and funding plan? No. Kurt, do you have any comments?
No, Mark, I was just going to say that if the North Harbor bid results are any reflection on the atmosphere of construction companies, you know, wanting to work, I think this project could come in under engineer's estimate. So I think it's a go.
Okay. I've got one more question of the Glow. So you're extended the bid date by 10 days? Is that what?
Yeah, Mr. Mayor, we had, at that same pre-bid, we had concern that the time was relatively short. We were nervous, again, Member Martin brought up the idea of we're running out of time, which we are on that first portion, first award of $3.4 million. We have to have it spent by July 1, so we were eager to get this ball rolling, and shortened the overall initial bid to just shy of a month, which is this is a big project. This is one of the biggest projects Petersburg's ever done, and so, you know, I thought it was probably wise to extend it. Hearing that concern from other contractors that they needed more time to get some good numbers, so we went ahead and already moved it out another 10 days in hopes that you would go along with this plan and have enough time on the table for the electricians to go to work on this.
So when will the bids be due and opened? I'm just curious.
December 6th at 2 p.m.
That'll be a happy
here
day.
in this room.
Okay, is there any more discussion? I guess. Actually, the time to come and comment on this kind of stuff is, but I let Bob do it, so I have to give you some time. No, stand, you have to go to the mic, and I can't let one and not the other.
I was just wondering, could we gear this, the ramp to local preference for building it? Because I saw the one out at AML, and, you know, like Wrangell, they keep all their money in the community. They keep it in Southeast, and they have Svensson or somebody over there, any kind of fabricator, put it together, weld it. The one that's going in the North Harbor's from somewhere not in Alaska.
Yeah, I think the plans are out. That part of the plans won't be changed, and you know, I don't know if anybody in Southeast has the ability to build a ramp it's big. It's going to hold a loaded tractor trailer, 72,000 pound gross vehicle weight. So yeah, it's big. So, but thanks for your input. Yeah, local's good. Any more discussion from assembly members on this? Will clerk call the roll?
Kurt, Kurt?
Yes.
Nancy?
Yes.
Cindy?
Yes.
John Paul?
Yes.
Mark?
Yes.
John Heberle?
Yes.
Okay, it passes 6-0. We can move forward with that. Now, new business, and the first item under new business, consideration of proposed ordinance 2013-18, an ordinance providing for Chapter 9.12 entitled Littering of the Municipal Code, updating current language to reflect borough incorporation. This is the first reading. Entertain a motion to adopt this.
So moved.
I'll second.
Been moved by Member Strand, seconded by Member Lagodakis to adopt ordinance 2013-18 in its first reading. Any discussion? Clerk, call the roll.
Nancy?
Yes.
John Heberle?
Yes.
Kurt?
Yes.
John Paul?
Yes.
Mark?
Yes.
And Cindy?
Yes.
Okay, ordinance number 2013-19, an ordinance providing for the Harbors and Ports Department and Advisory Board. It's the first reading. The proposed ordinance would provide for the administration, operation, and maintenance of a borough harbor department and provides for the retention of a 7-member elected Harbors and Port Advisory Board. This ordinance, as well as proposed ordinances 2013-20, Public Safety, and 2013-21, Parks and Recreation, expands the existing duties of advisory boards to also provide advice to department heads on their respective departmental duties and responsibilities. The ordinance has also removed the secretary position from the advisory boards and changed some responsibilities of the board chairpersons. I guess that's put in there, Kathy, to address the assembly not giving direction to the boards. Is that why we're changing this in all of the?
We worded it so it would actually do what the boards have been functioning the last few years. When department heads want to bring something to the board, they do, without the assembly actually referring it. This allows them to do that now correctly.
Still comes back to the assembly for
Yes.
approval. Okay, entertain a motion to adopt ordinance 2013-19.
I'll move that we adopt.
Second.
Been moved by Member Lagodakis, seconded by Member Haverlick to adopt ordinance 2013-19. And in this vote, we're agreeing to redraft the ordinances, Kathy, for that wording.
It's already in there.
Okay, and so we're changing public safety, okay, I see what we're doing here. All right, any discussion?
Mr. Mayor?
Yes, Mr. Hope.
For this one, the Harbor Board has been the most active, and I think, frankly, for somebody who's not a commercial fisherman, has been the most valuable to me. But I'm still going to vote no on this and the others because I do not believe they should be elected boards. I think it would be better if they're advising the Assembly that they be appointed.
Okay. Thanks for stating your position. Any more discussion from the Assembly? No? Will the clerk call the roll?
Cindy?
Yes.
John Hogue?
No.
John Heberle?
Yes.
Mark?
Yes.
Nancy?
Yes.
And Kurt?
Yes.
Okay. Ordinance 2013-19 passes in its first reading 5-1, with Member Hogue voting against it for his reason. Consideration of proposed ordinance 2013-20, an ordinance providing for a borough health officer, fire department, police department, and retention of a 5-member elected advisory board. This is the first reading. I'd entertain a motion to adopt this ordinance.
So move.
Is there a second?
Second.
The motion's been made by Member Haverlick, seconded by Member Strand to adopt ordinance 2013-20. Any discussion by Assembly members? Cindy.
And I may be out of order, Mr. Mayor, but I have been puzzled about the piece of this ordinance designating a borough health officer. And because this ordinance designates the CEO of the hospital as the health officer without any apparent compensation and without any real relationship between the hospital and the borough, I think we need to defer this until after our discussion with the hospital board in December.
So you're proposing to table this until, I guess, the meeting on December 16th?
That's correct.
So procedure on that, Kathy, were you going to second and discuss that, or just take a vote?
Yeah, because you already have a motion on the floor to adopt.
Right,
so.
that's what I thought, so. So is there a second to, Member Lagedock's his motion to postpone this to a time certain, December 16th at 7 p.m.?
I second.
Okay, it's been seconded by Member Walhooter. Discussion?
Who, Mr. Mayor,
Yes.
the, as I understand, the health officer has been the chief of staff of the medical center from time immemorial?
Correct.
I don't disagree with that point. However, I think that the understanding of the relationship between the hospital and the then city was possibly not correct. And where we're trying to clarify that now, I think it would be best to wait until after we have the meeting with the hospital board. And there are some pieces to this ordinance that are, I think, still need some clarity. I don't know if we can just take a member of a community and designate them as a health safety officer without any compensation or without any relationship between them and the borough.
Has this ordinance, Kathy, been reviewed by our legal counsel, like
It
the rest
has.
of them?
It has, but not for that matter.
Not for that reason? Yes. And, you know, my opinion of the meeting that we're going to have on December 5th, Thursday, with the hospital board is, I don't think that is going to be a meeting where we take action. It's just a work session.
I understand.
So, but maybe from that, you feel that we can
At least discuss this and see if there's a common understanding or if there's a need to further flesh some things out.
Okay. Any more discussion on the motion to table this until December 16th? Mr.
Mr. Mayor, I think this is appropriate as is, just because we're looking at the person that has the most expertise in this area as filling in this position. And I think just because there's a lot of things, like Assemblyperson Hogue that does voluntarily, and, you know, he's volunteered to do that. Well, that's voluntary. But I don't see this as a problem because we're using an expertise of a community person and a community facility that is part of the city, part of the city and borough. I just don't see a problem with this.
Okay. Any more discussion on this motion to
My only additional
table?
point on that is I do not know whether their contract stipulates that they will hold that position. And I think that that's something that we should clarify.
Okay, we still, one thing to keep in mind is we still have to draft the ordinance that designates how the hospital board and the assembly work together.
Right.
And that could be in a discussion there, but, so if there's no more discussion on the motion to table this till December 16th, that's what we'll be voting on is, yes would be to table it, and no would be to go back to the main motion and vote on that. So, will the clerk call the roll?
Cindy?
Yes.
John Hogue?
No.
Mark?
No.
John Haverlick?
No.
Nancy?
No.
Kurt?
Yes.
Okay, it passes 4-2, or it fails 4-2, the motion to table it until December 16th. So we're back to the main motion now, which is ordinance 2013-20, an ordinance providing for a borough health officer, fire department, police department, and retention of a 5-member elected advisory board. So any more discussion on the main motion? Will the clerk call the roll?
Cindy?
No.
John?
Which one?
This is to adopt in first reading.
No, which John?
Oh, I'm sorry. John Hogue?
No.
No. Mark?
Yes.
John Haverlick?
Yes.
Nancy,
Yes.
and Kurt.
Yes.
Okay, the main motion passes 4-2. So ordinance 2013-20 has passed in its first reading. That brings us to ordinance 2013-21, an ordinance providing for Borough Parks and Recreation and retention of a 5-person elected advisory board. This is the first reading. Entertain a motion to adopt this.
I'll move that we adopt this ordinance.
Is there a second?
Second.
It's been moved by Member Lagadakis, seconded by Member Strand to adopt ordinance 2013-21 in its first reading. Is there any discussion? Will the clerk call the roll?
Mark,
Yes.
Cindy,
Yes.
Nancy,
Yes.
Kurt,
Yes.
John Haverlick,
Yes.
John Holt.
No.
Okay, it passes 5-1. This is ordinance 2013-21. Okay, this brings us to authorization to place the Crane Dock widening project out to bid. P&D engineers have completed the final design for the project and have estimated the construction costs to be $877,234. An added alternative for 7 access ladders is proposed at an estimated cost of $38,650. Harbor Master Wallen has provided written recommendation to authorize the bid process to take advantage of having multiple construction companies working in Petersburg for this upcoming season. Now, if anybody wants to review the plans, they're at the Harbor Master's office. So I'd entertain a motion to authorize the project to go out to bid.
So move.
Second.
Been moved by Member Havlicek, seconded by Member Strand to put the Crane Dock widening project out to bid. Any discussion? I had one question, and Steve kind of clarified it for me. I see the bid is $877,000, and if you go into the description, we have $800,000 that was a grant from the state, and then I understand we have some matching money that the harbor put in. So we have more than enough to fund the project. What was the city's share?
Our share was 200,000.
So that
On
gives
the
us a total of
original.
$1 million?
If in
basically?
fact it comes through that way.
Okay.
So I do have a question. Is this what you were talking about, Troy, this project?
No, the drive-down ramp.
Okay.
Okay, any more discussion from assembly members on the Crane Dock widening project? It's much needed, and the ladders would be a wonderful addition. Okay, clerk call the roll.
John Holt,
Yes.
John Haverlick,
Yes.
Nancy,
Yes.
Mark,
Yes.
Kurt,
Yes.
and Cindy.
Passed. Yes. It did pass. That's what you get when you're writing and talking at the same time.
6-0, it passes unanimously.
They can't multitask, they just think they can.
Okay, item F under new business, authorization to solicit a request for proposals to provide psychiatric emergency response, treatment services, and community support. Entertain a motion to request an RFP for this reason.
So move.
Is there a second? Can the mayor second things?
I'll second it, Mark, just to get the discussion on the table.
Okay, it's been moved and seconded. Moved by Member Holt, I believe. Seconded by Member Walhooter to go forward with this RFP for psychiatric emergency response treatment and services.
If I may jump in. This is in response to, during the last budget process, several assembly members talked about, excuse me, back up. The assembly has what we call a community services budget, which is a series of, I guess we can call them grants. It's museum, mental health, Chamber of Commerce, several others that are basically given as in a grant format to these different agencies for various things they do. Chamber of Commerce, for example, for operating the visitor center. In the past, money has been given to mental health for their alcohol and drug program, as well as some of the other things that they do. I was asked by several assembly members to that they would prefer an RFP process rather than just the assembly giving that money out. So develop this as a form to be used. I've heard from, for example, Assemblymember Haverlick, who has a different perspective on, maybe moving towards a billing system where mental health bills us for the services they actually provide to the government. That's not how we've done it in the past. Doesn't mean we couldn't go there, but a lot of what this service is kind of that being here to provide services for members of the community who sometimes can't pay. So it's not necessarily a government service as such, but it's kind of the borough deciding this is a worthwhile thing to have available to the community. So that's where the RFP came from. That's why we put it together, and don't know the next step other than how you guys want to approach that. So,
okay, Cindy.
If I may, I'd like to take about 3 to 5 minutes of your time. I did a little research on this one and asked Susan Omer some questions, and also asked the Department of Health and Social Services about the possibility of doing an RFP, and I got some interesting information from the state. They said private clinics can enroll for-profit Medicaid providers, but they can only deliver services done by a clinician with a master's degree or higher. So they do very few services in the home, in the school, and other additional services. Mostly what they do is assessment services, psychotherapy, and medication management. Alternatively, state-funded community behavioral health centers, and this would be Petersburg Mental Health, are only nonprofit agencies. They receive a grant from the state of Alaska, which lets them bill for Medicaid and lets them provide some grant-funded services. This is more or less equivalent to the grant that Petersburg City would give out, except that our grant wouldn't have anything to do with Medicaid. State-funded community behavioral health centers can provide services done by a clinician with a master's degree, and they can provide services done by a paraprofessional who would be under that person's guise. For Medicaid clients, they can bill either of these types of services. This makes the money go further, as these are the less expensive services done by someone with less than a master's. They also, they do home health settings, school services, substance abuse, and other things. State-funded community behavioral health centers are the backbone for the big issues in a community. Community response to a suicide or a shooting, for example. They also have the responsibility for assessing people for emergency psych needs. For example, a psychotic person found wandering in the street at 4 o'clock on a Saturday. State-funded behavioral health center grant funding goes to the things that they can't bill for, and that's what you just said. For people who don't qualify for Medicaid, who don't have private insurance, can't self-pay, or those services that are not billable, for example, suicide prevention classes in the schools. Then I asked Susan Omer what was the makeup of the budget for Petersburg Mental Health Services. And their whole budget is approximately $834,000. They were asking us for $35,000. And Susan says, and my apologies, I did not tell her I would read her message, although there's no reason for it to be exclusive. Borough funds allow us to see people that are not part of the state priorities. It also allows us to be responsive and have the capacity to respond to the needs of the overall borough, as well as the specific needs of police, hospital, other first responders, in the school. We provide 24-hour-a-day coverage to respond when the police or hospital have a psychiatric emergency. The nonprofit does not do this. It also allows us to provide more comprehensive substance abuse services. The funding in some ways has been used for client services in that it has been used to support serving people that we are not allowed to serve with state funding, but in the large picture, the funding support is about building and maintaining capacity so that we have the ability and the resources to respond to local needs immediately. There are no other RFPs being put out by hospitals or municipalities to my knowledge, and that was a question that I asked her about other operations across the state. Funding, if it is provided, is given to the local nonprofit behavioral health center in support of the program so they can benefit the community. There is not a competitive RFP because there usually is just one nonprofit comprehensive behavioral health center in the community. The additional points that I want to make is, having had quite a bit of experience with contract writing and management over the years, who would manage a contract for mental health services that does not have mental health experience? And this RFP appears to cover the suite of things that Petersburg Mental Health is doing, and I don't think we anticipate paying $834,000 out of Petersburg's budget to cover it. So I would recommend we back away quickly. I think that we have a good system. The state has told me that Petersburg Mental Health does more than an adequate job. They have faith in their ability to do their services. I haven't heard any complaints from privates that they feel like they're being competed with unfairly. I'm not sure what this is going to, I'm not sure what problem we're trying to solve by having this RFP. I think we could make some problems with it. And if we bring an additional provider in a community that already has several, we may reduce the capacity of one to be able to operate fully. And so that's my 2 cents on that one.
Thank you, Cindy. Any other discussion? Mr. Haverlick?
Mr. Mayor, I was one of the ones that thought because there are other mental health services in town, that to make this fair, it should be a type of an RFP, or at least billing for services, and have the agencies that offer those services put in a bid as how much they would charge for the services we require. And if the police department has someone that they want seen or related to an arrest, then they would say, we would like this person to receive counseling or whatever for so many hours, and they would buy that services from the person that provided the lowest bid. The same, like if the court had someone that, like a youth that had alcohol problems, and they mandated 20 hours of counseling, that if the person, parents couldn't pay, or the person himself couldn't pay, that the billing, whoever put in the best bid for counseling for alcohol services would get that. And I agree that this RFP shouldn't go forward, mainly because to me it doesn't. I think the different agencies or departments we have within the borough can purchase those services, and based on a bid process. But the other thing is that this one talks about emergency mental health services, and that's what Petersburg Mental Health gets their state grant to do. That's their #1 priority. So if we're giving them money to pay for emergency mental health services, we're paying them for the same thing the state is, because the state mandates that they provide 24-hour emergency mental health services, as Cindy mentioned, and that's what the grant's for. So I don't see us as, in this RFP, we'd be duplicating that.
There's just one other point that I should have made, and that is that it's not a strictly competitive situation between a profit and a non-profit. Petersburg Mental Health Services refers clients to True North Counseling, so they do work together, and there is some transfer back and forth.
Mr. Holt?
Mr. Mayor, I was one of the other assembly persons that was troubled by just doing a straight grant without any kind of analysis of what are we giving the money for, or is there a competitive process? And I still have those concerns. And I am a huge fan of Petersburg Mental Health and do a lot of work at their requests. But as a public official, let's say if we're going to give out money, it seems to me that there should be some analysis. Are we providing it to a service provider that will give us the best bang for the buck? And so that's why I thought instead of just saying, you agency, you're going to get the money, that there should be some analysis of what does this community want to spend that money for through an RFP, that we expect people to do X, Y, and Z for this 35,000 or however much we allocate this next year through the budget process. Other people have suggested the allocation could be zero, but on the other hand, nobody's ever accused the state of overfunding mental health. And they do provide currently a very valuable service in this community. So I still think there should be an RFP process, because it just bothers me to say we're granting money to organization X when there are multiple organizations out there, and if the others don't search, or True North don't bid on it on some form of an RFP, then sort of, okay, we don't have to waste our time in future years.
So my question to that would be, is this going to be, if we budget $34,000 a year to them annually, are we going to have to do it in the RFP every year?
Well, the answer is no.
I see in the contract you could state the number of years, I guess.
I left that blank for a reason.
Okay.
I was, from our perspective, I mean, and I say that carefully, the police department is our prime users of their, services, and Chief Swihart may be able to speak to it. But that being said, Glow took advantage this summer of their help, and we, to my knowledge, we have no complaints of Petersburg Mental Health at all. I think the total funding we give them, Jody, was at 85?
Actually, 85,000,
Yeah.
50,000 for mental health services, and 35,000 for alcohol and drug abuse services.
Again, just trying to be responsive to the assembly. I think these folks earn every penny of what the borough's giving them, but again, this is the community services budget that I look, in a way, is really the assembly's grant program, and trying to be responsive to how do you want to approach that?
Okay, thank you, Steve. Nancy?
I have a question for Steve.
Yes, ma'am.
Does Petersburg Mental Health put in a request for the grant every year?
Yes, they do.
And what's to keep True North from putting a request for a grant in?
Nothing to my knowledge.
Okay.
Any more comments? Kurt, would you like to comment on this subject at all, or are you doing good?
Well, I'm just trying to gather it all up here, gather it all in, as to the purpose of their RFP.
Okay, is there any more discussion on sending this RFP out? Will the clerk call the roll?
Cindy?
No.
John Ho?
Yes.
John Haverlick?
No.
Mark?
No.
Nancy?
No.
Kurt?
No.
Okay, it fails 5-1, so we won't send an RFP out for psychiatric services at this time. Where are we? Communications, is there any communications by any assembly members, or no?
I have one. While we were at AML...
You're not going to read that whole thing, are you?
No. I'm going to put this at the library. While I
Okay.
was at AML, a representative from University of Alaska Southeast School of Management wanted me to pass on materials to our community, and I promised I would put them in the library if anybody's interested in public administration, taking classes, distance classes, or location classes. The materials will be at our new library.
Thank you. Any other communications? Assembly discussion items? Is there any items up for discussion?
Mr. Mayor, I didn't know if I should have asked to amend the budget or not. I am troubled that the memorandum we received from our attorney regarding the Petersburg Medical Center was deemed not a public record because of potential fiscal impact. I think that is the exception that can swallow the rule. I recognize the attorney wrote this memorandum based on his understanding it would not be a public record, but I think that can be abused. I mean, this is an area that's going to spark a discussion in a couple of weeks, and frankly, I think in the future when we solicit attorney opinions, there should be more of an eye of this is an opinion that's to benefit all of us. And unless it is litigation or labor relations or something very specific with a I would say, a financial impact that might be contingent upon unusual decision-making, that something of this nature should have been a public record.
Any discussion? Again, I tend to go along with what the borough attorney tells us, which might be kind of naive doing that all the time, but that's why we hire him. I will take that for, I'm not the one that makes the decision, so I guess we could have a discussion with the manager, with the attorney when he
Well,
says
just because you can do it doesn't mean you should do it. And I'm not even convinced a can would survive a court fight, for instance.
Right. I mean, I believe that decision is up to you, Mayor, and the Assembly. I mean, I don't think the borough attorney said you can't make it public.
Right.
He at this point left it up to the Assembly to make that decision. I'm trying to use the language he used, which is a lot of this is policy rather than legal opinion, and therefore it does fall into the, he's being very reluctant to give policy decisions to the Assembly.
Okay, so maybe next time, I guess, John, if you have a question about it, maybe before the meeting, we should see if we want to make it, public. We can't have a meeting, but we can discuss it. I guess that's what you're doing here. So,
well, I'm just suggesting as much as direction is given to the attorney next time, that I think we should think carefully before we say, all right, go ahead and take an exception to the public records law.
Okay. Any more discussion items? Okay, recognitions. This agenda item is reserved to acknowledge individuals, groups, departments, agencies, or anyone for their contributions toward the betterment of the Petersburg community. Does anybody have any recognitions tonight, staff or assembly members? Mr. Haverlick.
Yeah, Mr. Mayor, I know Kathy was in the finalists for Clerk of the Year, and they picked the wrong person. Kathy should have gotten that, so I just wanted to.
That's news to me.
We didn't tell her. John, you blew the secret that was going to be used.
You just talked about the attorney and public knowledge.
Okay, I knew I shouldn't have recognized you down on the
I know. Anyway, I still think you should have won it.
Thank you.
Okay, any other recognitions? Okay, that brings us to the next item on the agenda. Mail-in elections. Attorney Heidemann and Clerk O'Rear are currently rewriting the municipal election code to provide for borough formation. During the incorporation election process, many residents expressed their desire for the borough to conduct all of its elections by mail. Comments received to the borough's inquiry last March resulted in mixed views from the 21 residents that responded. Does the Assembly want to provide for mail elections? If so, does the Assembly want to provide for all elections to be by mail? Or does the Assembly want to allow by mail elections only for the conduct of special elections? So if this is something we're going to, it looks like we can take action on it tonight, or if you'd rather, we could have it on a future meeting, but any discussion on this? Mr. Havlin?
So, Mayor, yeah, I have a question on this. I know we have absentee ballots. Is it an option to do both? Like, if someone like from King Challenge would like to vote, that they can get like an absentee ballot, so we can have in-house, in-person elections, as well as the option of letting people use a mail-in ballot? Are both options, or do you have to, can both be an option, or do you just have to do mail-in ballot or in person, and there's no option to combine?
Kathy, would you still do mail-in or absentee voting in the council chambers here, or the city
We would
hall?
probably still have in-person absentee voting, yes, with all mail, but then we'll have to keep track of the ballots, really, really careful that way. I haven't ran an all-by-mail election, so I'd have to learn it. but I can see benefits to it. I can see some disadvantages to it. But I would say, yeah, you can do both at the same time. They're starting to more and more across the state. Almost all the boroughs provide special elections by mail now, like we did actually for the borough and corporation. But there is one now, and that's the ordinance I've been looking at. It is Lake and Peninsula Borough is strictly all by mail. But they have written their ordinance so they can actually have an in-person mail if the assembly so decides. So we're at a point now, we've got to decide which route we want to go. And I can just tell you guys, I don't think it'd be cheaper to run a by-mail election. I think it would be more costly.
That was my next
We
question.
are finding it very difficult to recruit election judges. The ones we've used for years and years, they like to retire, and they were so happy there was not an election this year. There was nothing for the state. We will run into a problem recruiting help. If we go to a mail-in election, actually this body right here will be the counters of those votes. We'd have the electric ballot counter here, but you guys would be responsible for more or less the work that the judges do during the day at the end of the election process, counting.
Mr. Hoag?
Mr. Mayor, a number of things. One is these questionnaire results that's part of our packet was not exactly an overwhelming community response. We got 11 yeses, 10 nos, and 2 no answers. Now, I think we ought to solicit a little more community input before we do something, number one. Number two, having lived for a number of years in a state that went to vote by mail, which was Oregon, and watched it in Washington, where I've got family. There is an advantage that there is in those states a higher percentage of people participating in the electoral process, and it's not a dual system, John H., because it's vote by mail. So you get the ballots, and you've got a couple of weeks to get them back. I don't think it would help the folks that were complaining about the borough election, because they're saying I still got to go to my post office box wherever it is. It's not going to solve the Keene Channel remote, the Growls. I think I got their name pronounced right this time. I took some flack for butchering it over at KFSK. It's not going to solve their issue of you're going to vote in November and the weather's bad, but we don't control November elections anyway. So the argument against it that I heard was, well, do we have more issues of voter fraud? And the answer was no. I'm not aware of anybody claiming that vote by mail has enhanced voter fraud whatsoever, or made it easier for somebody to take somebody else's ballot and fill it out. I mean, it just didn't seem to be a concern that materialized itself. So I would suggest that we consider getting more public feedback on this issue. It is a system that seems to be working well. And if our electoral judges are, some of whom we know, a lot of them are retirees, that, and this is going to be a recruiting problem, it's something that should be considered. I'd like to see the cost figures, estimates, though, as well.
And that was going to be my point, was I'm curious as to the costs. I think, having done an Arts Council mailing last January, there were approximately 1,700 box holders, and that to me doesn't seem like an overwhelming number, but by the time you print materials and send them out, and I don't know whether, I can't remember if it's postage paid.
Every registered voter, if you got 2 in a box, you're still going to be putting them in 2 different envelopes.
Right.
So, any other comments? Nancy, do you have a comment on this? Or?
All I know is my son in Oregon says he kind of misses going to the polling place to cast a ballot.
You wouldn't if you stood in line for 2 hours.
So maybe, from what I'm getting from this conversation from the assembly, is maybe we should have the clerk look into getting a cost estimate for what it would take, and maybe some way solicit input from the people that are in our election area. Hopefully they'll respond so we can get some kind of some guidance from them before we make our decision.
Maybe our 2 media outlets can conduct ad hoc polls to see what kind of response they got.
So anyway, any more discussion on this? I guess
we definitely need more input from the community at large.
I agree. So maybe we should solicit it and see how we can do it. We can have it on another agenda either in January or...
I was going to say,
let this
perhaps
happen.
after the holiday season would be a good idea.
Public hearing or something in January.
Yeah, I mean, well advertised, maybe have, another one a month later. But it's not like, when would we have to make our decision up for the next October election? Yeah, that might be another good question.
Well,
Because we have to do an ordinance, 3 readings.
yeah.
Should be plenty of time, shouldn't it?
You'll have time, because the whole process will be, it's really starting in hard June, July, so, unless someone wants to.
Well, we'll see what
referendum or something.
Kathy comes up with then, I guess. Next item, the
Thank you.
favorite one, item 17, motion to adjourn. So move.
Mayor,
Oh, sorry, Kurt, what's up?
I got a question for Kathy, and I don't want to belabor this anymore because it's almost 2 o'clock in the morning on the East Coast here. But what is the earliest you can vote absentee? Well, I mean, what's that time period? How long do you have?
Well, if we go to an all-mail election, all the times are going to change. Right now, you can come into my office 20 days, I usually have the ballots 20 days ahead of the election, which is the absentee voting process.
Okay, thank you. That's what I needed to know. You can move on.
Do you want to make the motion to adjourn then, since it's later where you're at?
Sure, I'd love to.
Okay, it's all yours.
Motion to adjourn.
It's over
Okay.
there.
All those in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Okay, meeting is adjourned.
It's-